Hi. So, I was looking at the news to see if they were covering this situation in Batley. The BBC didn't have it in their items. They were covering, as their main story, COVID, and then the UK-China tensions and a big train crash in Egypt. Just on that last point, briefly, Egypt seems to have a very bad safety record when it comes to train crashes. It seems to be a big one every few years, so that's noticeable. The day I moved into this house, actually, in 2002, there was a huge disaster, about 300 plus people killed. So that's obviously a big issue there. Right, I want to talk about the situation with this school in Batley. For international viewers, because the chances are this will start to get international coverage in some quarters, it's worth bearing in mind that the area where this happened has had its share of racial and religious tensions over the years. So Batley is a sizable town outside Leeds, which is a big city in northern England. Um, Leeds is the city where the London bombers came from. They weren't immigrants, they were born and bred in Leeds, and they were the London bombers in 2005. In 2001, there were race riots in numerous places in the north of England: Bradford, Oldham, Burnley. Um, and in 2016, British Labour Party MP Joe Cox was brutally killed by a far right activist. So this is an area that's had its share of problems. Um, the reason I mention that is because it might explain some of the background to this. Um, there's been developments. This is the cover of today's Times. Williamson enters row over cartoon of profit. I'm pleased to see this. The Education Secretary has spoken out, um, and the article reads it's by Charlotte Weiss and Nicola Wilcock. Gavin Williamson has condemned parents' protests against children being shown a cartoon of the Prophet Muhammad in class and as completely unacceptable. This referred to the fact, if you aren't familiar with the case, a religious education teacher supposedly showed a cartoon of the Prophet. We don't know the exact details of what was shown. We don't even know the context. If he or she was, I'm not even clear if this was a male or female teacher. Obviously, their identity is being protected for obvious reasons. But, whether they were simply eliciting a debate or what. But um, he intervened last night. A spokesman for the Department of Education said, "It is never acceptable to threaten or intimidate teachers. We encourage dialogue between parents and schools when issues emerge. However, the nature of protests we have seen, including issuing threats and a violation of coronavirus restrictions, completely unacceptable and must be brought to an end." So I'm pleased he has spoken out on this. If it escalates, I think the Prime Minister will have to speak out. Usually, the Prime Minister would not get involved in a localised issue, but this actually taps into a bigger problem. President Macron spoke out in defence of freedom after what happened in France. I think Boris Johnson needs to do likewise here. We cannot allow ourselves to be bullied by these Islamists. Um, the report says that Mohammed Amin Pandor, an imam and community figurehead who had met the head teacher, said, "What has happened is totally unacceptable and we have made sure they are aware." He's not talking about the aggressive protests, he's talking about the supposed lessons. There was concern last night after the Purpose of Life, a local charity, identified the teacher on social media. Mohammed Sajjad Hussein, the founder of the organization, said members were deeply hurt by his lesson in letter written to the school. He added it's sadistic behavior. Sadistic behavior. Even liberal democracies have a limit on freedom of speech. We can't use the expression freedom of speech to offend people. Well, who gets to determine offence? Non Muslims like me find your attitude offensive, deeply offensive. I think he needs to get a knock on the door from the police as to what exactly he is putting or encouraging to be put online, because I think it could be tantamount to harassment. What's very alarming is this teacher has apparently got police protection after threats, and given what happened in France, that isn't overdoing it. It's not scaremongering, or for want of a better term, yeah, unfortunately, it's probably needed. Now, what does that tell us? What leads Islamists need to understand, and I'm calling them Islamists on the ground that they're making it political, they're making demands. That's the definition of Islam. Um, Islamism, to conflate imposing values onto society that goes beyond religious freedom. Because that's what's happening here. They're making demands on school. What I do think is concerning is how quickly the head teacher pandered to the demands, and the National Secular Society raised questions about that. Why is it that this head teacher, Gary Kimball, felt it necessary to move in so fast? There was a Labour Party MP who also had to backtrack when she made a foolish statement. I think it was this was discussed on a thread. Yeah, bear with me a second. Um, and this just shows where the Labour Party is. Uh, yeah, she's a Labour MP for Batley in Spain. In fact, I think she must have succeeded Joe Cox. But she said, yeah, Tracy Brabin, the incumbent Labour MP, who is also the party's candidate for the upcoming West Yorkshire mayoral election, issued a statement reported by Yorkshire Live at 3:30 p.m. on Thursday, excuse me, in which she claimed the upset and offence that this has caused is understandable, but was also predictable. Stated she was pleased that the school had recognised the depiction of the Prophet Muhammad was inappropriate and that the school had apologised to the Muslim community. So she's siding with the mob. Later, when she was met with ridicule, people accused her of appeasement and asking her if blasphemy laws now existed. She backtracked and now issued a similar statement to Tory MPs, showing support for the teacher in question, saying that no teacher should be facing intimidation or threats. There is no excuse for that, before calling for conversations between the school and the local community to proceed in a dignified and respectful manner. I would argue the behaviour of this mob has already violated that. Fellow West Yorkshire MP for Morley and Outwood, Andrea Jenkins, tweeted, "It's a shame you didn't say this in your original statement 18 hours ago. We need to protect our teachers. They certainly should not have to be under police protection. And if elected as West Yorkshire Mayor, you will be in charge of the policing." Um, this is what's so manipulative. These protesters are using it's kind of like the Karl Popper paradox. Um, of tolerating intolerance to the point where we accept the intolerant. These protesters are throwing this freedom of speech argument, they're weaponizing it. They're saying, oh, but this is democracy. How about freedom of speech? We're just expressing our freedom of speech. But freedom of speech always comes with responsibility. So if their argument was the teacher was being unprofessional by deliberately being provocative, okay, express your concern. Why not arrange a meeting? Say we feel this was very hurtful to Muslims and it's inappropriate. I personally think that there needs to be scope and flexibility. I agree with the National Secular Society for teachers to explore controversial issues rather than just giving sort of a group think dogma that parents, demand. If, for example, the lesson was about how should Muslims respond to alleged insults to the Prophet, how is a teacher supposed to work around that sort of subject if he cannot or she cannot show the cartoons in question? But when Muslims insist that Islam is peaceful and tolerant, they need to look at cases like this and really, really consider what are the optics of this? Is this peaceful and tolerant? Is acting like hypersensitive crybabies over an image supposedly of the Prophet peaceful and tolerant? I accept that it might be taboo in a way that non Muslims can't understand. So maybe there's a case to be made people shouldn't just show it to be deliberately provocative. But I'm not convinced that is what happened here. I would be very surprised if an RE teacher was deliberately trying to insult people. It might have been a bad judgment call given it's well known how sensitive Muslims can be, but that would amount to victim blaming. In the end of the day, we cannot have a situation where mobs get to dictate the way things are just because they claim offence. What those protesters need to understand, you're claiming that your feelings are hurt. Well, you hurt and insult the feelings of millions of people who believe in human rights and believe in dignity and believe in freedom. Every time you get into your aggressive tantrums, you insult those of us who believe that isn't dignified and that is bullying and threatening behaviour. Freedom of speech would be them writing a letter and saying, can we please have a meeting to discuss the issues here? It would not be gathering as a mob outside the school gates, which is threatening staff, which no doubt will have a negative mental health impact on students and staff. And as for the threats against the teacher, I believe that charity needs to be investigated. I believe there needs to be a police inquiry to see if threats are being made. And any individual who is identified making threats, they need to face the law. There needs to be a situation where they understand that they cannot just make demands. If they feel that the lesson was inappropriate, fine, say that. But that there is absolutely no justification for this sort of mob. I mean, it's a no-brainer. It shouldn't even have to be said. But there are, frankly, some on the left who are just doing the usual thing of trying to be PC and just say, oh, well, we need to understand their sensitivities. As soon as people resort to mob behaviour, their moral argument goes out the window. So Tracy Brabin, she made a fool of herself by making that statement. What she should have initially done was condemn threatening behaviour, then maybe say there needs to be dialogue, etc. But at least Gavin Williamson's on the right side of this. It's depressing to see this happening. It is important to recognise that this country has around 2 million Muslims, and we're not saying thousands of people descend on Batley to support the protesters. So not every British Muslim has this mindset. Nevertheless, this very conservative, reactionary attitude is widespread. And what I would say to those protesters, you're saying that your feelings are hurt. Do you not? Can you not see how sensitive you look? And why is it you have a tantrum over something like this, but you don't care, or you seem to care in a very minimal way to what China is actually doing, persecuting Uyghur Muslims? Why is it that this angers you more than that? When they allege that the West is Islamophobic, this is the country that has imposed sanctions on a regime that is actually committing genocide against Muslims. So it's galling hypocrisy. But I really do think local MPs, I think that head teacher needs to explain his position. Why did he cave in so quickly? Why? I accept that he has a duty of care to his staff, but in that case, it's the responsibility of West Yorkshire Police to contain the situation, make arrests for people, threatening teachers. That's what needs to happen. They need to understand that they cannot just push their way around. And freedom of speech has never included the right to threaten people. Never.